Welcome back to another episode of Northwoods Whitetails podcast. I'm your host, Joey Davis. This week's episode, we're going to do something a little similar to last week's. Last week seemed to be a success, going back in time, pulling some stories from the older generation. And this week, we're going to go through some good ones. We've got Eric Adams, Corey Ryder, and Mike Berry. These guys tell some phenomenal stories, and I think it's important to regroup on them, listen to them again, and maybe you guys can pick something up from it. Any of these episodes or stories that you hear of these episodes, you can find the full-length episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Little current events. We're sorry that we haven't had any new guests on here. We just haven't had a chance to sit down with them. It's been busy. I can tell you myself, I've got 14 guys going, and I'm either creating fires or putting fires out, one or the other. So fall's coming faster than I'd like, and it's time to get things done. For all of you that were interested in the Woodman Arms 20-inch Northwoods carbine, you guys can find that on our website, nwwhitetails.com. You guys can buy some merch, support the cause, as well as you guys grab some 2024 Darn Tough socks. The hunt socks we created with them last year have dropped here, mid-July. Phenomenal sock. I'm partial to the lightweight sock. I will wear that sock from pretty much spring all the way through till snow flies, and then I'll switch over to the medium weight, and then obviously heavyweight over the calf late season. But that lightweight sock, I'm extremely partial to. It's pretty sweet. Fall's coming. Preparation begins. If you guys aren't out hiking, I suggest doing so. Get the family out there, pick a ridge, climb it. I can tell you that I'm getting prepared. I've been on the carnivore diet here the last 2 weeks. Travis and John Moulton both been doing it, and now myself and Brent are doing it. And I can't tell you how good I feel. I went on a hike there the other night, and I had legs for days. I would say more steam than I have ever had in the past. I would highly recommend it if your body can do it. But yeah, outside of that, the moose hunts, you'll see those moose hunt videos coming soon on YouTube. Next couple weeks, we should be dropping those. Those are very, very good. Brooke put a lot of time into them, and we're excited to share those hunts with you. Without further ado, let's dive right into this episode.
I forgot about the one the New Jersey guy shot right in front of me. Almost shot me.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I was coming down. It was old logging road. And all of a sudden, I was tracking, and there was a buck on the trail. And I said, Jesus, this is perfect. And it just happened to intersect where these guys were. And this was back more in the day where there's more hunters around and stuff. And all of a sudden, bullets are flying. I mean, they're hitting the limbs right. But I ducked down behind the tree, and I'm like, holy moly. And all of a sudden, the guy starts yelling, excited, screaming, you got it. And I'm like, I yell. And he's like, Robbie or whatever. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not who you think it is. I'm right here. He says, I just shot an unbelievable deer. I was closer to the deer than he was. Wow. I was the first one to the deer. So we tracked. I was on the buck. Yep. He intersected. The buck saw him and turned and was running back to me.
And he was.
And it was just on the other side of this, where spruce comes together in the logging trail.
Yep.
And I couldn't see on the other side, but that buck was right on the other side, and he was shooting right by me. And he hit that, and that was a triplex brow tines. That was a book buck. That thing, was
big,
just
non-typical.
Budweiser buck, Budweiser can for bottoms, just gigantic,
Really?
Longhorns. Yeah, really nice buck. And I don't even know if they went and,
Got him
it
scored.
was definitely a book buck.
Yep.
But they took out a Rambo knife and
Oh no.
they cut that from the bottom lip to the ass end, and I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
what are you? I'm like, aren't you gonna mount? You're ruining your cape. And they're like, oh no. I mean, the guts were. I'm like, okay, you guys are all set.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. Good, good buck.
Yeah.
It was kind of sad. It just really didn't have much respect for the animal.
That's too bad.
It was, they were fired up, which is, but
Yeah.
that was not good.
That's a pretty close call.
Yeah.
So you not only Maine, you've killed some bucks elsewhere too. I mean, you've done the Trifecta. You've done that.
Yeah, we always joked around. Well, about the 600-pound club.
Yep.
Trying to get, and I don't know if up here they had the buck club. They had the 3, but I don't know if they did it by.
Who had that? Did Johnson have it?
No, it was up at Klutz.
Oh yeah, in Eden. Yeah, the old store.
What is
If you could get 3 deer, 3 different states,
in 1 year?
that
Yep.
We're over 200.
We're over
that
200.
or that the total weight of the 3
Okay.
was more than 600 pounds.
So Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine
Yeah,
in 1 year.
And I'm sure there's other groups of guys within certain areas of Vermont. Like I just don't know them, right? But like in this area of like a 30-mile radius, there is some serious buck hunters, right? Like serious big heavyweight hitters. And that store, I mean, it would take a serious buck to win that pool.
Yeah, 240s, 250s.
Yep.
Out of Vermont, even.
There was some big
Good
ones.
ones. Yeah.
There were some big ones.
Yep.
So what did that pool, was it for Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine?
Yeah, so they had a separate pool, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, right?
Oh.
Like a combined weight. Then they had one for Vermont.
Gotcha.
They might have even had one for.
So you did the 3 in
I
1
didn't
year?
join it. Yeah, I just.
But you got 3 200-pounders.
I got 3. Yeah, so it just chimed out right because I always concentrate on Maine. Maine's the goal, no matter what. If it's 70 degrees, I'm hunting Maine. I don't care. I'm hunting Maine.
Yep.
That's my happy place.
Yep.
So I had gone up. It was the first day, and a buddy was staying with me. So I had taken on the Sunday, taken camp up, set it up for him, get it all set. He came too. But my girlfriend at the time had made plans for a concert the next night on a Monday. So I got up the next morning and said, well, I got an 8-hour drive back or whatever, but the concert's not until 8 at night or something. So I can leave at, noon or 11 or whatever. So I said, I'm going to hunt, but it was, first day, blue sky, fairly warm. So yeah, I just headed down to a spot I knew right on a corner of a river. And, I knew it would be cooler down there, and so I just went down there and kind of posted up and was having a good day, just relaxing in the sun, listening to the Brooke, and of course you always run scenarios through your mind and picture what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
I pictured it, and there it was, a rack buck coming around the corner, coming up the stream, just barely in the stream, walking up the shoreline, and so that's when I had the 300, and so I rested and shot, and he just raised his head up. And I'm like, I think I aimed too high. I was like, well, because he was a distance away. And so I said, no, I'll just barely, I'll tuck it right in there. And I tucked it in there, and he just ran back into the woods. So I got down in there, and he was there right there on the shore, right in the rocks. And, sand. It wasn't rocks. But, so that was 245.
Wow.
First day. So, yeah, he was heavy, hadn't run it off yet. Short deer again. And so then...
Next day, right?
So then I booked it, got in the truck. I was scrambling to get the deer out. It was completely uphill the whole way. Dragged it out, got it to the truck, got in the truck, called up my girlfriend when I finally had service and said, I'm going to make it, have my clothes out. I'm booking it back. Pulled into the dooryard, ran in, changed, got back in her truck, left. She goes, when are you headed back up? I said, I'm not. I've got one. It's in the back of the truck. She never even saw it or knew. I didn't tell her.
That's funny.
So then my buddy ended up shooting one up there. And season hadn't started in New Hampshire. Oh, no, it must have started in New Hampshire. So I went back up and got this camp. And a friend of ours was building a camp in Pittsburgh. So I said, hey, let's hunt New Hampshire. I'll put my camp in his dooryard. And so my dog is being a pain here.
So everybody that hears the little clanking, it's a year-old yellow lab that's chewing on a moose antler, right? And he's got a hold of my arm at the moment. So you hear any ruckus, it's just her.
And
good girl.
So we went to New Hampshire. I didn't know the area very well. Friends of mine had hunted it some. So I just explored around. I think it was must have been the first day. I explored around the first day. Again, blue sky day. Looping back around toward the truck, kind of got into a clear cut, posted up on this side hill looking down into the cut, and it was perfect. And sat there for, I don't know, an hour or so, and then finally looked down in front of me, and there was a little island of spruce trees, and I said, God, I could make out a leg, and then I could make out a shoulder, and then I go, there's a deer bedded down right there. And just as I'm thinking that and looking at that, and I've been there, like I said, an hour and a half, that deer decides to stand up, and it was a buck. And it didn't, it looked pretty good. So he started to go. He'd either winded me or something, so he started to go, so shot him. So that was an 8.178. And that was, first or second day that I'd hunted there, so got that back to camp, past the guy who stayed had the camp.
Yep.
And he knew I'd had a buck in Maine because he was up there. Got one the first day, so then got one there. So then I said, okay, well.
Is that Carl? Who was that?
Tib.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
he was like, couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, well, I'll hunt in northern Vermont. And I think we had some time before. So then we got good snow, and I'd driven up long road and not much for tracks at all, and stopped and saw the woman at the store.
We can say the name of the name of the store because
I can't remember the name of it.
You can't remember the name of it?
Is it little?
Yeah.
Averill store.
Averill store, and for anybody that's had ever been there, previous of the last 10 years, there was a little old lady there named Priscilla that ran this store.
Sweet lady.
It was a store that you'd walk in and you'd get a soda and a candy bar, and that was about it. There was nothing else there. There was some fuel.
Yeah.
I've stopped in there with Nate, and we've looked through the books.
Yeah.
Because the guy has all the book all the way back to the 70s.
Yeah. So
of all the
Polaroids.
Yeah. And we were looking through them. Some giants come through there.
Yeah.
So I swung in there to get a soda, my morning coffee, and talked with her. And she says, well, why don't you just drive down this road? That's always been a good area. Because I was kind of like, well, what should I do now? And so she just kind of said that. So I said, all right, I'll go for a ride down that road. And got a nice buck track. And so, again, that wasn't Garmin years or anything either.
No, that was what year was that? Was that
96?
Yeah.
Long time ago.
That's the year I was born.
Back when the deer were black and white. Back when the air was, when I was young. I hopped on that track and boogied right along. And he was weaving. He was looking for some doe. And I remember coming out into, always seems to revolve around an old cut. And there was somebody had a box blind up in a tree, an old plywood thing. And I said, I could see where this track had gone right through all the small spruces right toward, and I said, well, if this was a buck and there's anybody in there, they would have shot. And I poked my way along and look in, kind of waving to see if, and nobody was in the blind. And I remember I got just underneath the blind and got on the other side, and I said, boy, this is nice moose area, nice moose country. And I looked over and I saw the back of this, and I thought it was a moose. It was all wet, because it was a wet snow day. And I remember that vividly, that it looked like a wet moose, wet brown hair, but a little black looking. And it was a buck. He was 20 yards away. Less than that, probably. And he took off and ran right straight away. And I could see where he was headed, and I ran and hopped up on this log to look over all these small spruces, because I could just see his head and his rack going through. And he got down far enough, I picked a spot, and I said, if you go through there, I am touching off. And he hit it, and I touched off. And I walked down through there, and blood, hair. I said, perfect. Walked a little ways, could see leg, hit a leg. No matter what, you can always hit a leg. And more to this story about that. And so I kind of rested for a little bit, let him chill. But I didn't know where I was, so I didn't know if I was going to get cut off,
right?
What main road I was going to cross.
Yep.
So I kept going. I would always spot him 200 yards away, running, could see him limping. I'm like, God, I got to slow down, let him, but then I'm like, God, it's getting where I got to get on him. I got to get on him.
Getting late.
I started going more and more, catch a glimpse of him, pop a shot off, everything else. I ended up shot at least 2 or 3 of his legs. I mean, it was where I felt so bad. At that point, I'd hit 2 of his legs. So he was not going well. Mm-hmm. But he was still, they want to survive. So.
Yeah.
But I just put it in afterburner after that and just said, I got to kill him. I got to get him. And finally caught him on a bank looking back and got one into him. So, and that one was 224.
Wow.
That's a pretty good buck.
That is a big buck.
8-pointer. So I went back and thanked her, and she came out and took a Polaroid to put in the book.
Yep.
And I think I gave her an extra $1 to take another Polaroid so I could take it back to the guy at camp, to Tib at camp, and leave him a note and say, there's another one. So that was 3 that year. But that's not the kicker. So then muzzleloading comes. I leave my camp up there in Pittsburgh. We're hunting northern Vermont. And we gang up on a couple friends. We were all hunting together. Yeah,
you,
Pat and Chris. We went up into an area.
I'm going to fight with a lab.
My dog. The dog. And, we went up into this area, cut, and then came back down off the hill toward the road. And we see this track. I could see it from a quarter mile away coming off this hill. And it looks like a cow had walked through the pasture. And we get up to it, and I got out and looked, and I came back to the guys and said, this is a buck track. I said, this is the kind of track that you look for.
This is the one.
It's unbelievable. So we made a little plan, said, all right, 2 of us were together on it. I was on him first, and then he stopped and he fed at a tree. And he laid down his rack into the snow and was like, I called Chris over and was like, you got to see this. And we're like, there we go. That's a nice rack. That's ended up going into a Christmas tree farm. Probably people know what I'm talking about. And right up onto a knob in the Christmas tree. And I go, he's bedded down. He's already busted us. He's seen us. We go out. He's running through the Christmas trees. I hear the tractor. I go over to talk to the guy. Tell him what's going on. He's like, no problem. I said, we're not going to hunt in here. We just want to follow him through. He's like, yep, no problem. Super nice. Followed him through. The other guys were on him. He cut across, got up onto a ridge, and I said, I'll cut up, kind of horseshoe around, see if he comes across. And sure enough, I came down off the side hill, and here comes, I'm trying to remember if he was with a doe. I don't think so. And along he comes, just absolute monster deer. Big, huge rack, gigantic. I mean, he had a huge foot. He was a huge bodied deer, and by far the biggest one for that year. But that was back early in the muzzleloading days, and literally was the old hammer, percussion, short carbine. And I was trying so hard, open sights, trying to lay a nice sight line on him. And you see him, he stops and he's perfect, but he's, 100 yards downhill. And he's looking back behind him. My buddy's on him. And he's starting to, twitch and get ready. And I'm like, I got to touch off, and never touched him. Followed him down across the stream, up on top of a mountain. My buddy saw me going, literally crawling up this mountainside. I caught him bedded one more time looking at me, but he was too far away. He said he saw me just like pulling myself up by the saplings going up.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm done. But we went back and followed him the next day. I went back, found him, followed him the whole next day, and then he went out of snow because it warmed up. And he went down in the lowlands, and I think he may have even crossed over into New Hampshire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he went down low and
No kidding. So it could have been a New Hampshire
swooped
buck.
across. He was gigantic.
This is sort of a continuation of the last podcast that I did with you guys. This is kind of going to be the following years after I shot my biggest buck in 2015. So the next year, 2016, of course, I wanted to go back and hunt the same spot. And I don't remember all the circumstances, but I got there and there was no snow. But I wanted to kind of hunt up the same area, the same mountain, and there was this old trail that went up there, and no snow, completely calm and still evening. You could hear for miles, it seemed, and it was in the evening, so I wanted to just sneak up. It was crunchy leaves, dry, those conditions. Walking through the woods is basically fruitless. They can hear you coming. So I ended up putting on, I was going to wear just socks, but I put my running shoes on as I had my running shoes, and they were quiet enough. So
You were going to wear just socks.
yeah. And so because when I shot the buck, it was this area that I shot that big buck in 2015. And he came to the grunting and all of that. And he was fighting the other buck. The first day I had shot at that other 200-pounder and missed. And so I had seen enough of their patterns in that area and the scrape lines and everything that I wanted to try this. So I ended up putting my running shoes on, and I was just sneaking along this road. I was making no noise. I was stepping in the soft gravel with those shoes. It wasn't making any noise. So I'd go about 100 to 200 yards very slowly, and I would doe bleat and grunt. And I was doing that, and about halfway up, I heard this buck coming. I didn't have much time. It was getting towards the end of the day. This buck I heard him coming from a long way off, crunching through those leaves. And my mistake was that I was totally exposed, kind of standing in the middle of that trail on a high spot, where I should have had some form of cover. Anything, just step behind a bush, or I was out in the open, and I heard him coming, and he got within probably 50 yards. He was right through in the thick brush on the side, and I couldn't see him, and he stopped, and it was, I knew he was hung up, and I just froze. I didn't want to move or do anything, and after a while, and I knew he was grilling me. I knew he could see me, and I could slowly hear him stepping sideways, so he was trying to get downwind of me. There was this slightest breeze ever, and he did. He worked his way downwind to where he caught my scent and ghosted me, gone. So, but I put that in the back of my mind, like, man, this almost worked. I couldn't believe it. You know, I grunted like I was doing, and that buck, he came in. I always wondered what that buck was because it sounded mean. So I can't remember what the rest I did in 2016. Probably chased a big buck somewhere else. And so coming to 2017 was a rough year for me. Kind of, my life fell apart. I was in Colorado for a while. Working in Denver, truck got totaled. We were hit by a couple vehicles. It was just a rough situation for me and Gracie. And kind of at the end of October, I was working construction. We were slinging glass, curtain walls, and it was no fun. So at the end of October, I had the itch. I was like, I got to get back to Maine. I'm about to just pull the strings on this and just go. And I did. And I gunned it for Vermont first so I could leave Gracie with my mom to take care. My mom always takes care of Gracie during hunting season. And so, I mean, nonstop going for it. I remember I drank a coffee and a Red Bull. I never drink energy drinks, but I had to. And I got on the ferry to cross over from New York to Grand Isle. And I was the first vehicle on the ferry, and I passed out. I woke up, the ferry attendant rapping on the window. The ferry had cleared out.
Son, get the hell off.
Yeah, all the vehicles had gone around me, and so I was that tired. So I go and I drop off Gracie, and then I head to Maine the next day. And I don't know if it was opening day or the day after. It might have been opening day. And my plan was really I was just going to get out in the woods where I wanted to go and just hunt the evening if I had any time, but then just camp in the truck. And I think it was supposed to snow, and I was just going to wait on the snow. And, you know, so I bought my license, and I go just, you know, I'm just screaming, getting out into the woods. And I get out there, and same thing. I go to the same spot, and it's in the evening. I'm going to go up that road again. And it's more of a trail now. It's grown in so much, you know. And so same thing. I put the running shoes on, and I'm doing that thing. I'm going over 200 yards, and I'm grunting and bleeding, and I'm doing that, and I go all the way up to the end of that road. It's probably a mile and a half, and I was really shocked that I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. No moose. I couldn't even see any tracks in the gravel, so I was kind of concerned that maybe they weren't traveling through there anymore. So I got to the end. Towards the end, that trail kind of did a 90-degree turn. So at the end, I turn around, and I'm coming back, and I had grunted the whole mile and a half every 200 yards. And I'm coming back, and I get to that turn, and I turn the corner, and there's a buck standing in that trail, looking right at me. He was coming to me. It's in my foot tracks. And he's just looking at me, and he has half an ear ripped up, and I could tell by his physique that's a 200-pound buck. There's no doubt about it. He looked jacked, you know, just big shoulders, big neck, but I could tell he had no brow tines, and he wasn't very wide. And I hesitated, thinking, man, I don't know. It's very early. I don't know how big this buck is rack-wise. I know he's 200 pounds. And but I was not sure about it. And after a while, probably 10, 15 seconds, he turned his head to the side, and I could see that he had 4 points on one side. And then he turned back and looked at me, and I knew he wasn't going to give me much more opportunity. If I was going to take him, I needed to do it. And I knew he was a 200-pound buck, and I just drilled him. He made, you know, straight on, right through the heart, and he made one bound off that trail and died. And so I go over there, and he was, 7-pointer, 3 on one side, 4 on the other, big body deer, young deer, and I was thrilled. It was awesome, but then it was also, my season was over, and I hadn't even hunted on snow yet. You know the feeling. Mm-hmm. And so I took him to report him and everything, and I said, they asked if they were like, oh, this is 200 pounds. Do you want to weigh him, get your patch and all that? I said, no, I don't even care. I didn't have time for all that. I said, I don't even care about the weight. Let's just go. And I was trying to get to my buddy's place so that I could hunt New Hampshire the next day. And so I ended up getting to my buddy's place. And the next day he had, we put the buck up on his scale, on his hanging pole and everything, and it was 200 pounds. And so that was cool. So then the following year, and that was the same spot as that 11-pointer that I shot, that I told you about previously. So it's all the same spot that this occurred. The following year, 2018, I think it was around November 14th. It was like mid-November. We hadn't had any snow, but then there was this big storm coming, and everyone was getting excited about it. The hunting hadn't been good yet. No one had been able to track, and here's the first big storm, and it's going to be going. Like, everyone knew, like, it's killer conditions. It's going to be a blizzard. If you can find a big buck track, you're just going to walk up and shake his hand. It's that good. And so I made arrangements. I said, in these conditions and everything, sleeping in the truck wasn't very appealing. So I found a place I could stay, meals, all that stuff, close enough where I wanted to be. And so I arranged for the whole week to stay there and everything. And I drove through. The snowstorm started the evening before, and I drove through all of that, and I got there super late. And the guy had shot, I think the day before, maybe 2 days before, a 222-pound, I can't remember what it had, beautiful rack, really nice buck. The owner of this establishment, really nice buck. And so, and he couldn't, I was the only one staying there in the whole place, so, which is good for me, that's how I like it. And so the next morning, I get up, it's that snow and everything, and I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to go back to where that trail that goes up the mountain. And I had actually found a signpost over there the year I shot that big one, the 11-pointer, and I put a camera there, and I had 3 really big bucks on the camera. And 2 were over 200 pounds, I could judge by the body size. And the one with the biggest rack was not 200 pounds, but it was over 160 inches. And I know that because that deer ended up getting shot later on by someone else. So I knew I wanted to get to that spot. So I head out super early in the morning, you know me, and I'm going, and the snow was so heavy. I mean, it's probably snowed 12 inches, and it was it was like driving through concrete, and the truck wouldn't do it.
Is it wet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the back end was too light, and I couldn't, so I had to drive in reverse.
How far did you drive in reverse?
Like miles. I was like, there's no way I'm getting there. And that was the only way, so that, and I pushed.
Because you'd have to back up, go forward, or what? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it had to be. It was miles in reverse. I don't want to give out a number, but it was a long way in reverse, and my neck hurt and everything, and so, and I finally get to where I wanted to find a track. And sure enough, here's this giant buck track following a doe. I couldn't believe it. It's the perfect. The wind was howling, and so that any track you'd find would be smoking fresh, and it's following a doe, and they're going up the mountain, coming from where I had the camera on the side. So I thought, hey, it's definitely one of those 3 bucks, and any one of them is a buck that I would be thrilled to shoot, And so, and I knew it was 200 pounds. So yep, this is happening. And I got on the track, and it was like knee-deep snow. It was hard to walk through. You could barely move, but I knew if I could just keep punching through it, I was going to catch up to him eventually.
Yeah, he didn't want to go anywhere either.
No, and it looked like they were going to be on top of the mountain, and that's kind of what I was expecting. But kind of halfway up, I cut their tracks coming down, and so I knew I was right there. Like, they some reason they came down and crossed their tracks again, and now I'm right behind them. And I maybe went 20 yards, and I kind of peeked through some beach whips, and I could see that buck standing there maybe 20 yards, just looking straight at me. And I could see the base of the antlers and the brow tines. That's all I could see, but I knew it was that buck. So I pulled up, and you know, you picture where to aim in your mind all the time, right? You picture that vital spot, you know, behind the shoulder. You go through that again and again, over and over in your mind, so that you're ready for that. So instinctively, or reflexively, as I pull up and aim, right, there's probably a, I don't know, 8-inch beach covering that spot, but I slam one right into that, and it did not go through. And that deer goes full tilt, screaming down the mountain, and my second shot on the fly just punched him right through the heart.
How far was he?
Probably 50 yards at that point.
Yep.
And then my third shot actually hit him just below that, kind of in the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And he snowplowed and stunned. So, you know, I go walking up to him, and I knew it was the deer I was tracking, a 200-pound buck and everything. First thing I realized, this is not any of those 3 deer that I had pictures on the camera of, which it surprised me for whatever reason. And I was like, wow, that's a big buck. And I think I did a real, you know, bad quality cell phone after the fact video of that buck that I put on the channel. But so I ended up getting him out. It was a pretty easy one with those conditions. Went pretty good on the snow. And
I bet he did.
He weighed 218, and I showed back up at the place, and they couldn't believe it that I had just got it done so quickly like that. They thought, like, how did you just do this? You know, they were just super impressed.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to put it up on the game pole next to his 222-pounder, and you know, for their advertising and show, hey, you know, it's 1 week, 200-pounders and all that. And back in those days, you know, I was all tried to be under the radar and low key and all that. And I was no, I don't want the attention. And you know, then people will say, oh, well, he stayed at this place, so this is the area, and blah blah blah. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
And so I didn't do that, but yeah, no, that was a good hunt. So, you know, I've hunted that spot for a few years in a row, and I've shot 3 200-pound bucks, and where I connected with all 3 and got them was it had to be within no more than a quarter mile where I connected with all 3. I mean, they range. I'm seeing they range all over, but where I ended up, for whatever reason, connecting with them ended up being within that same little quarter mile.
Just the way it worked out.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got yourself a little honey hole.
You know, I actually haven't hunted there for a while. He's changed a lot as the woods do. They're dynamic and everything. But, you know, the interesting thing about that buck, and we got the rack right here, and it's a heavy rack. I don't know if it was an old deer. I don't think it was an old deer. I actually think it was a young deer. It's got mass. It's kind of got this webbed on one side. It's an 8-pointer, gnarly bases, school buck. But when I was tracking him, see here, his behavior was strange to me, and his behavior is what indicated to me that it wasn't a super mature deer. And that's the thing. When it comes to tracking, everyone focuses on the size of the footprint, the width of the stagger, the length of the stride. And those are the objective measurements of a buck track. But the behavior of that buck, how he moves through the woods, how he acts, the subjective thing, that tells a different story. That adds another level of information, you know, because you want not only a big buck, you want a mature buck. When you can apply both the objective findings and the subjective, you know, how's this buck act? Mm-hmm. You want that old buck that moves through the woods efficiently, doesn't lose his mind like a young buck that's just bolt through a china shop looking for a doe. Like this buck, an old buck knows what he's doing. He's going to take his time. He's going to go at a pace where he can go all day. He knows the game. He's done it before. It's not his first rut, you know. Mm-hmm. And you can tell those subtle things in the subjective. If you've followed enough buck tracks, after a while you start to learn how to read not only the objective information but the subjective thing. The behavior is really important. And this buck The way he behaved when I was tracking him, which it wasn't a very long track. This is going to be your turn up here.
Okay.
You got to turn to the right and then come back across.
Gotcha.
He lost the doe track. Like, he caught her and she ran off from him, and he stopped and peed on his hocks and hit a little bush. Like, he was very frustrated, which to me, and I could be wrong on this, but to me it was like, oh, he's really horned up and he's very frustrated, like a young buck. And I say young, like, 4.5-year-old maybe, which, I
would
guess
say he's 4.5.
I guess what I think, mature buck is like at least 5.5, 6.5, that sort of thing. It's relative, but
Yep.
It's just the way he acted. And then I also had an indication that he might not have a super wide rack, because he did go through some narrow stuff, but I had no doubt he's 200 pounds. And, that's what I was going for. So it's all these experiences that I learn from and apply to future hunts that, it's how you learn and grow and how you improve. And I'm still learning,
And I think we all are.
Yeah. So that's basically, what I wanted to share with you as far as the buck stories.
That's an awesome story.
I had another one that I got to the truck and tears were running out of my eyes. I shot one in Giant Mountains, as a matter of fact. Back at that lean-to, I'd hike. I'd watch the weather, and if it looked like it was going to snow, I'd take off and hike in, because it was easier walking when there wasn't any snow. Well, I got way back in there, and it dumped snow bad. But I got up in the morning out of my sleeping bag, walked up to the mountain, got up, picked up a track that was going down the mountain. I didn't go very far. I looked down. He was down there in his bed, and I shot him. I dragged him down to the trail, which was completely filled in with about 1.5 feet of snow. Went back up to the lean-to, grabbed my stuff, came down, packed him all up. And the pack was so heavy that you don't take it off. You just sit on a rock with it on your back. And you can't even put it on. You set it on the rock, and then you slide into it. Well, I had to break trail from there with that pack all the way back to the truck. And I remember telling myself about every third time my leg cramps, if I ever get out of here, I will never, ever come back here again. And I don't think I did. It was one of those deals, when you're all alone, you talk to the big guy, and you're like, dude, get me out of here, and I won't come back. I swear to God I won't.
Promise.
And I did. I remember tears were just starting. I was like so physically exhausted that I just, wasn't. But it works. I will tell you, if you want to shoot deer in the Adirondacks, and if you want to do it consistently, it will work. But you're gonna. But I will tell you, it's easier now than it used to be, because the gear available is so much better. Even though I had the best sleeping bag, even today, that would be as good as you can get. The air mattresses are better today, but the clothing, Kuiu, I wear that stuff all the time now. That stuff is utterly amazing. More so because it's lightweight, but you can ventilate it. Because the way I hunt is I go really, really fast until I'm into deer, then I stop. And if I'm overdressed, I sweat and get tired out with heavy clothing. If I'm too light, I can't slow down enough when I get to where the deer are. So with the Kuiu stuff, you got so much ventilation in the pants and stuff, and they're so lightweight. And so you can travel really, really fast and cover a lot of ground. And then when you get to where you think your odds are, improved, I pull the zippers back up, bring the straps back in, and I'll usually carry. My hands are my weak link. Sometimes I carry the down mittens, usually just on one hand, and then it allows me to go from 100 down to 2 miles an hour, and then that's where the binoculars come in, and the safari sling. Why guys aren't doing the binoculars and the safari slings, I don't even know why. Especially tracking. Everybody's, oh no, not for no bullshit. Unless you have a death wish and you just want to keep jumping them and you want to keep throwing lead, if that's what you're into, then knock yourself out. But if you want to track a deer and you want to kill it with the least amount of effort, you're fooling yourself if you're not using binoculars and the safari sling, because if they're not readily available and you can use them anytime you want with little or no effort, you won't use them. I see guys with them in their pocket. I can tell you right now, if I did that, I would never, ever use them. Mine are right here. I have 2 different setups, and I spent a lot of money on binoculars, and they're right here. And I can pick them up and with the safari sling, all I have to do is drop, and I'm up.
Yep.
And
are you shooting a scope gun or?
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
More so to pick a hole through and that's where the binoculars come in. I would much rather shoot them standing still or in their beds. The absolute perfect hunt from the road was in the Corey's Road. Of course, there again, you still have to follow the deer for the knowledge and the wisdom. Where they go, how they go, where they sleep, what they eat, all that stuff. And Benoit's books are great, by the way. They are absolutely phenomenal. Everything in those books is absolutely correct. And what I would do is I'd go into these areas and I would slab these mountains halfway up, looking for a track. Once I took a track, I would turn and then follow it. And because I knew the Adirondacks, because I knew the deer, at that point, every 20, 50, whatever, depending on the terrain, I was constantly searching. And I shot another buck in a blowdown, following him, caught up to him. If it hadn't been for the binoculars, absolutely. Because I knew the buck was there with the binoculars. I'd put the binoculars down. I could not see that buck. And I knew he was there because he was in a blowdown. And I'd pick it up. I know he's there. Even with my scope, I couldn't find him. But after a while, with the binoculars, especially, and they have to be good. If they're not good, don't waste your money. If they have to be really, really good binoculars.
What power do you like?
8. Well, they're right there. They're the Jaworski 8 to 40, 42s or whatever.
Yep.
And I have Zeiss too, which are good, but the Jaworskis are a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've shot deer in their beds, same way. When you get to an area where they think there's deer, because I got sick of jumping them. You know, in the Adirondacks, you have to walk enough. You want to get them on the first time. You don't want to have to jump them. And like I said, over there, they can go from mountain range to mountain range. And 1 mountain's bad enough. 2 is insanity.
Wear you out quick.
Yeah, wear you out quick. Because once they're on the ground, you got to get back.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the binoculars are, and there again, once you start working with them, you look at that area, that 20, 30 feet that you can't see. You know what I mean? You don't look where you can see, and you look where you can't see. And then when you focus them in, it literally is. I mean, I read it in magazines when I was younger, and I was like, that's so stupid. I mean, that's great out west, but I don't need that. I'm shooting my deer at 30, 40, 50, 60 yards, 100 yards. Why do I need those things? Well, it's still relevant because that's as far as you can see. And if your vision is obstructed by distance or trees, it's still obstructed.
Yeah.
So, and I'm telling you, I've shot another buck right in his bed, came to an area, was all tracked up, had scrapes. I knew he was right there somewhere. It was on the top. That's where they liked. So I just stood there and I just kept looking and looking and looking and looking. Finally, I caught something that didn't look right. I kept looking at it and looking at it and looking at it. Finally, it moved. I'm like, oh, shit, it's a deer. And then you're laser focused on it. And then you slowly start picking out stuff. You're like, oh, there's an ear, there's an eye. Oh, that's an antler, right where it's supposed to be. But if you look at them long enough, they will move. And as they move, of course, your picture changes. And then you can start picking out the antlers.
The quality, is it because if they're not a good quality, everything gets blurry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you need that clarity because you're looking at that area, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
In that area, I mean, you're trying to pick out small stuff, an eye, an ear flicker. I can tell you at least 3 buck I would never have shot without the binoculars. One was in his bed on bare ground. One was that one I was telling you about that I slabbed him out and caught him with that. You just and another benefit is, and this sounds a little arrogant, but I don't want to shoot a small deer. And the problem I've had in times where I've tracked them, the longer I track them, the bigger the deer gets. He may have started out a 4-pointer, but by the time after 3 or 4 miles, he's growing a point every mile. and I've literally told myself, you don't shoot this deer until you know what it is. And I failed. After about, 3, 4, 5 hours or whatever, this deer jumping, making an absolute fool out of you. Now it's like revenge. And I've literally shot them, brought the gun up and shot. And the whole time, every alarm in my head is going off, going, no, don't do this. And I'm like, but it's just, it's like reverse buck fever, I guess. It's like, and you want it to be big. And the further you're in the woods, the, your imagination runs away. And I said earlier, that was another reason. I was so far back in, there were no hunters. There had to be a Boone and Crockett behind every tree. Oh, no. No, there just isn't. There isn't. I probably walked by more bigger buck when I left the truck than there's back in there. I ran into a guy back in there one day. His name was Alan Fishman. He was from New York City. Unbelievable guy. And I'm not saying that in necessarily a good or bad way, but he was just obsessed with getting an Adirondack buck. When I ran into him, I was back in Ward Brook, which was good 5-6 miles. He had a heavy pack on and 2 of those buckets that, you get drywall in. And he got so he would walk, drop the bucket, go back, get another one, kind of leapfrogging down. I'm like, dude, you're never going to get there at this rate. So I helped him. We started talking, and he was something else, this guy. He had 2 goals in life: to catch a big brook trout and to shoot an Adirondack buck. Occasionally he'd call me and he'd go, I walked way back in the mountain pond. All I saw was this tiny little deer track. I'm like, yeah. Just because you're back in there doesn't mean they're big deer. You still got to go up into the stuff. Because he tried hunting out of a tree stand back in there, and I'm like,
Be waiting a long time.
yeah. Like eternity. Eternity. No, it's
That Vermont buck in the corner there. That's a pretty good buck.
Yeah, it was 204. Oh, actually, that was a decent tracking story. It involves my brother-in-law, Randy Farrell. We had gone to Alaska that year hunting, and we came back, and he wanted to go deer hunting in Vermont. So I said, all right, meet me. And the first day there was snow, and this was up in Newton Valley, and I picked up a decent track, and I followed, and I know that area really, really well. So I followed him. I knew where he was going. I made a big loop all the way around him, and I came back and never caught his track again. So I knew he was in that circle. But by the time I got back to the track, it was too late, and I didn't really want to go up in there the first day, and because I knew he'd end up getting shot, and that's why I kind of gave up on Vermont. So the next day, we went up in from another direction and went up over the top down the other side. Well, we picked up 4 or 5 tracks, and we're following. We're down over the mountain on the other side, and he was with me. And I said, what are we doing following these deer? They're dull doe. This is insane. I said, and we're not that far from where I left that buck yesterday. I mean, I'm probably not going to be there, but let's, better than nothing. We had no more said that and turned that way and started walking, and he was coming right out of where I left him and heading right straight for me. I shot him the first time, and I thought I missed, and the next time I shot him here to the buffalo head. He was dead that time. But, yeah, that was kind of a tracking, but, if you're tracking in an area where there's a lot of hunters, you might be a little careful, because I've done Vermont a lot of times where somebody else would shoot them. If it's somebody you like and that's one thing, and if it's a couple days into it, it's not quite as exciting.
No, definitely not.
The only way I justify it is, good dragging, bud.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
Go.
No one can save you. You better run.